Good afternoon to you. And I think coming from the Department of Environmental Affairs, it's clear what we're going to be talking about. So just by brief outline, we'll talk about the legislative context or background, then some context, and then my focus is actually going to be on the Waste Management Bureau. That seems to be a very hot potato right now, so that's why we'll look at that, and then look at some progress. If you look at our legislative background, we had our constitution, which is the supreme law of the land. And enshrined in the constitution is a section that protects or gives protection to the citizens of the country regarding environment. And section 24 says very clearly that we should have an environment that is not harmful to the health or well-being of the people, and then it goes on to talk about sustainable development and ecological protection. But our focus primarily is on the not harmful part. And from that we derived the National Environmental Management Act, which came in 1998, and that is basically the overarching piece of legislation, especially relating to environment or environmental management. And then we had the white paper on integrated pollution and waste management in 2000, and then we had the law or the act, which we call the National Environmental Management Waste Act of 2008. And there was an amendment that came in 2014. And then together with this, we also have provision for regulations and norms and standards and schedules and those kind of things that the law makes provision for. Okay. Then we have the National Waste Management Strategy. And basically it outlined the following main themes or challenges that we face in waste management. And I think we agree that a few years ago we were a few million short. Now we, 55 or 58 and still counting. So the growing population and economy basically means that we'll have an increased volume of waste that will be generated, and this will put or exert a lot of pressure on the existing infrastructure. Because the waste management facility that we have currently, we understand that the lifespan or the life of it is decreasing at an exponential rate, and that's purely because of the volumes of waste that's generated. And then coming with technology, there's an increased complexity of waste streams, and there's urbanization and there's industrialization. So with technology, there are new chemicals that are being formed, and these are making the waste streams rather complex to manage. And then we also have an historical backlog of waste services, especially in the urban informal areas, the tribal areas, and the rural formal areas. We understand the challenges that in some places there's still no service delivery. And as a result, waste gets burnt or gets put into a hole in the backyard. And then there's a limited understanding of the main waste flows and the national waste balance. Okay. Then the policy and regulatory environment does not actively promote waste management hierarchy. And it provides, the policy and regulatory, it actually promotes the waste management hierarchy and provides for policy certainty for industry to invest in waste management technologies. And the absence of recycling infrastructure will enable the separation of waste at source and diversion of waste streams to material recovery facilities or buyback centers. Now, if you're looking at the waste hierarchy, previously our practice has been to dispose everything or dispose the bulk of it. And we want to change that and dispose the minimal amount. And you know, from literature studies or from benchmarking with the other countries, some of the countries, some of our European countries, they only dispose some instances 3%, some instances 4%, some instances 10% of the total waste that is generated. The rest of it is reused, recycled, treated, energy is recovered from it. And we have a different scenario in our country. And in our country, the practice has been that we dispose the bulk of it. We want to change that around. Okay, and there was a study that was done by the CSIR, and if you're looking at 2011, there was approximately 108 million tons of waste generated. And of this, 98 million tons was disposed of at landfill. That translates to about 90% to landfill, and only 10% something else was done with it. That something else can be recycling, can be energy recovery as such. And of this 108 million tons, 59 million tons was general waste. And I think the question we need to ask ourselves is, do we really need some of this general waste that we can turn into compost going to landfill? Is that what we want? Do we really need to put some of this general waste that, considering our current energy situation, do we really need this to go to landfill, whereas we could transform or change that waste material into some energy that we can utilize or supplement our current energy that we have? So 59 million tons is a lot. I don't know how many soccer fields or rugby fields that can fill, but it just sounds like a big number to me. So do we really want to do that? And then 48 million tons of this was unclassified waste. And I don't know what unclassified waste means in my language, but it just means it's mixed and people didn't bother to check what it is and just dumped it. And then the remaining 1 million ton was hazardous waste. Now, we spoke about approximately 10% of waste generated was recycled. And there is a need to accelerate our interventions to change this. We need a paradigm shift. We need to move away from disposal to treatment, to recycling, to energy recovery, and the likes of those. Okay. Now, in general, some of the waste management challenges where we find there's a lack, it's human capacity, and then we also have the challenge of money, finances, funding, then technical capacity at local government level. And, we've been around to quite a number of municipalities, and sometimes we find that the person managing the waste or the landfill site, the only objective for him is the trucks must come in, they must offload, the grader or the back actor or the front end loader must come and flatten it, and then he must add, 5 centimeters of topsoil to it. That's the only task he has. Everything else is not important. Now, do we want that type of person running the landfill site or the resource that we have currently, which is very limited? So we need to look at that. Then there's a lack or limited waste infrastructure. If you look at the equipment, and the practice has been that the budgets around waste management at municipal level, if a road collapses or a sinkhole appears in the road, and you've made provision to buy new machinery or new equipment for the landfill, which do you think takes preference? You answer that for yourself. Okay, and then there's a lack of coordination of initiatives. Lots of people have good intentions. Government departments have some money that they'd like to spend, but we work in silos. We don't coordinate our efforts. And very often we duplicate or we spend money unnecessarily, whereas a more coordinated effort would have ensured better results, more efficient systems. And then there's a lack of monitoring and evaluation, and that's so true. We spend a few billion and we don't bother to check whether the stuff is still there or it's gone. But yeah. So coming now to the Waste Management Bureau. When we had the Amendment Act, or the Amendment Act was assented to on the 2nd of June 2014, it made provision for what we call the Waste Management Bureau. And there were lots of reasons why such an institution or entity was created. We realized from the previous slides the lack of the provision of some of the services, the non-coordination, the funding challenges. So the department put together this entity, or proposed this entity, and it was passed in law. And basically Section 34 says that established an implementation bureau to deal with waste management, and it will be known as the Waste Management Bureau within the department. Okay, and the purpose was to build dedicated capacity within the department to fast-track the recycling economy. And then, if you recall from the original Waste Act in 2008, there was a provision there for industry waste management plans. So this bureau will look at implementing or to fast track the implementation of the industry waste management plans. Some of the objects and functions, we've just put a few, it's not the whole list. If you read the Amendment Act, it gives you quite a comprehensive list of responsibilities and objectives that the Bureau has. And it is to function as a specialist implementation agent. It's to manage the disbursement of incentives and funds. And, I'm just going to pause there for a while. If you've heard of the National Pricing Strategy, it is a creative way of generating some revenue to deal with recycling, to deal with waste management. It basically mainstreams or talks about the polluter pays principle. We just want to implement or enforce it a little bit more. So there's an opportunity to derive some revenue that can be put back into waste management. So the Bureau will be responsible in managing those funds that are generated. And from those charges, we hope that the money will be used for minimization, for waste reuse, recycling, recovery, transportation, storage, treatment, and disposal of waste, and the implementation of these plans. Okay, and also the Bureau will have a key or pivotal role in doing monitoring, especially considering that we'll be spending lots of money on infrastructure. So they will go around monitoring the buildings and take GPS coordinates and put them onto a database to ensure that we have the infrastructure in place, to ensure that what we're paying for is actually done, is delivered. So they will also monitor the implementation of the industry waste management plans. And the industry waste management plans will have to address how the sector will deal with its waste that it generates. And coming with the plan, because there's going to be some fees or charges attached to the plan, in order for it to be successful, we'll have to make sure that if buyback centers need to be developed or built, then these charges or these fees should actually fund that process. And that's what we want to do. So on the industry waste management plans, these sort of provisions need to be made. If buyback centers or alternative treatments or composting equipment or baling machines and those type of things that need to be procured, it needs to be part of the industry waste management plan as a budget. So government can fund that from the charges that are levied. And then also, if we look at a typical example being plastics, currently due to the oil price fluctuation or a very low crude oil price, using virgin plastic is much more cheaper than actually going and recycling. So how do you offset this? Because if you look at the manufacturing sector, it's all about costs. It's all the financials make that's what you are interested in. You're here to do business, you're here to make profit, and that's what you want to focus. You're not here to donate money to charity or give money away for free. So if you look at the crude oil price and the recycling of plastic, these sort of charges that we generate from the sector will basically now provide an incentive or provide a subsidy that will top up and hence make recycling more viable financially. And we would like to remove this waste stream from our waste in general. And then the other example, if you look at, we have e-waste, and what happens with our e-waste currently is a lot of it is, or the bulk of it, is put into a container and it's shipped off to China, Japan, Korea, the UK, US or UK or wherever it's being shipped off. It goes there and then they extract the precious metals from this. And we have facilities currently in South Africa that are able to perform the same function, to extract the precious metals from it. But because China and Korea and the other countries give them a higher price, I mean, we are here to make money. So you go where you get the best price or the highest price. So these kind of charges that we generate will actually be able to provide that top-up so that we keep the precious metal here. We extract the precious metal here. We have local beneficiation, and we create more jobs. Those are some of government's priorities: to create more jobs, poverty alleviation, and to grow the economy. And if we have refineries currently in South Africa. I believe there are 7, and of the 7, 4 are closed. So we're trying to see how can we revive them. Okay. And then the Bureau, just to get back, it's also to build capacity within the Bureau to provide specialist support for the development and implementation of municipal waste management plans. As I said previously, waste management, basically, you put your stuff out on the roadside, a big truck comes and collects it, it gets to the landfill, they are empty, it gets flattened, it gets covered, and that's it. We want to change that. So we want to build capacity to actually promote recycling, reuse, etc. And then also for capacity building programs within municipalities. We also want to, as the Bureau, support and advise on the development of other tools and instruments, processes, systems, norms and standard, and capacity building programs. We'll get to a little bit of that just now. Okay, in practice, the Waste Management Bureau will be a link between government and what we call the Product Responsibility Organization. Now, the Product Responsibility Organization is going to be for the different waste streams, for the different sectors. They would have a Product Responsibility Organization. And this organization will have a contractual binding agreement between the Waste Management Bureau to implement the industry waste management plans. And the Product Responsibility Organization will then outsource or subcontract people down the line to actually implement the plan. Okay, then the Product Responsibility Organization will also submit the business plan and request for funds. As I mentioned earlier, if you want to build any infrastructure, you want to provide subsidies or incentives, it should be part of the budget for the Bureau. Okay. And in terms of the Bureau, we will look at employing specialists. We've made this commitment, and if you've watched the press, you can see that we have honored that commitment. We have put in an advert for an accountant or economist. We have put in an advert for a process engineer. Those are 2 specialist positions that have already been advertised, and yesterday was the closing date. So if you didn't apply, sorry. Okay, excuse. Okay, then I see my time is running out. I lost 10 minutes very quickly, but nevertheless. In terms of setting up the Bureau, the Minister will have oversight and supervisory powers. It will sit within the department, and the objects and functions of funding, financial management, reporting, all of those things will sit with the department. And then the employees of the Waste Management Bureau will also include the Chief Executive Officer. He will be employed and be accountable to the DG of the department. Okay, the Minister has prioritized 3 waste streams currently, and I think for those of you that are in the waste sector, you should be familiar with them. It's the paper and packaging, the lighting, the waste electronic and electric equipment. We focused on this now, and once we conclude these 3 plans, then we look at the other sectors. We want to bite only what we can chew. We're not going to mess up those that are existing and that are operating fine. If you look at some of the other models or the other companies, associations, the Glass Recycling Company, Petco, the Rose Foundation, and the likes of them, they busy continuing with their business on a voluntary basis, so they will continue in that line until the Minister publishes a notice calling for these plans. And at this stage, maybe it will be good to say that the notice calling for these plans for comment will basically be published before the end of this month. So you can watch the Government Gazette if you're interested. Okay, the Bureau will be part of the department's offices currently in Pretoria, And the advert has, for the CEO, we've already done that. We're waiting for the necessary approvals before we can advertise. And I've already told you about the 2 posts that we've advertised. And then some critical staff from within the department will be seconded to the Bureau in the interim. And currently, the branch Chemicals and Waste will perform the functions of the Bureau.